Welcome to this tutorial on painting Sisters of Battle. This is going to be part 1 of 2, and we're going to focus just on painting the black armour. We wanted to do this in 2 parts because you could use this tutorial to paint anything that has black armour, such as Black Templar Space Marines, or maybe even some Stormcast Eternals. We primed the miniature with Games Workshop Chaos Black spray paint, but then we gave it a thin coat of Vallejo model colour black all over. That's so if we make any mistakes later on, we can match the finish. So I start by putting my colours onto the wet palette. The first highlight is going to be a mix of black and dark grey, just because dark grey is a little bit too light to start with. So I'm doing a roughly 50-50 mix, doesn't have to be precise, and I'm just adding a little bit of water so I can get a smooth finish. So I'm going to start my highlights on this thigh area here. I'm aiming around the centre of the thigh. You can see where my light above is actually shining on it, and that's where I'm aiming to add my highlights. Take note of my brush stroke and how I'm moving towards where I want the highlight to be. Then I come in from the other side. I'm just adjusting the size of the highlight. If I start too small, it's easy to make it larger as I go along. Then I move to the knee pad, and I'm just making sure those highlights correlate and that they're the same width and coming from the same direction. Now I just need to apply the same thing to the other thigh armour plate, and again I'm just making sure all these highlights look like they're coming from the same direction. When we paint the knee pad, that's a sphere shape, so we need to make sure the highlight matches that with a sphere shape as well. And I'm just hitting the edge above it. Now we're going to move on to the shin area, which is a slightly more complex shape. If you're ever unsure of what shape your highlight should be, just follow the edge of the armour. So you can see here I'm building up the highlights, I'm just following that curve on the edge. And as we come to the bottom of the ankle, it flares out, so the highlight just gets a little bigger. Now I'm going to move on to the toes, and again pay attention to my brushstroke direction. I'm moving it towards the top because that's where I want the brighter part to be. Then I'm just moving around the rest of the model and following the same thing. Just as you're doing this, take your time to make sure all the highlights line up and that they're all a similar kind of width. This is the key to the technique. It's just getting your highlight sizes natural looking. This will take a little time, but the results are fantastic. For the second highlight, I'm going to be using my dark grey now. And in this step, I'm just looking to cover a slightly smaller area than the highlight before. This is so we can build up a nice transition. So you can see I'm just building upon the highlights previously, just a slightly smaller part. I'm using more of the tip of the brush now to make sure I'm precise and follow all the shapes I previously painted. Now for the next step, I'm going to make a mix between my dark grey and French Mirage blue. Again, it can be pretty roughly 50-50, just so we have a nice incremental step between the two. Again, I'm just being careful, trying to cover just a slightly smaller area. The more you take your time with this, the better result you'll get in the end. Now I'm using the pure French Mirage blue. And in this highlight, I'm actually not going to be doing the whole length of the leg. So you can see I'm just using the tip of the brush, being nice and careful, and it's covering quite a small area now. I'm going to show you how to do these highlights on the knee as well, because they're quite interesting. So here we're just painting a small sphere shape, and then I do the little part above it just to match up. I can do these highlights in 2 applications to make sure I've got a nice strong colour. So here you can see me doing a second application, and it's a little stronger. And this is just nice and careful. You can see it's really giving a nice effect on the knee pad there. Now I'm going to do the thigh above, and you can really see on this part where I'm not painting the entire length of it. Just doing a little bit at the top to draw the eye and show where the light's hitting at the top of the thigh. That's starting to look really cool now. So after it's dry, I'm just adding that second application just to slowly build up that transition. So now I'm adding a really bright highlight, and this maybe you could just do on your characters, or if you're just painting a single piece. It's really up to you if you want to add these additional highlights if you're just doing this for the tabletop. Just added a little white for that extra brightness and that real pop on the black. So this is going to make it look pretty shiny. And you can see I'm being really careful now because I'm just adding tiny highlights. Just using the tip of the brush, just a small area of bright light really helps the black pop. And this makes the black much more interesting looking. So that's the black pretty much done now. If you're just doing this for tabletop, I think it looks awesome as it is. But if you want to really refine it and smooth out these areas here, then we're going to finish the model with some glazing. So I'm going to make my glaze just by diluting the black I used earlier. So you can see I'm adding lots of water here just to make it really translucent. I'm going to show you here on the paper how translucent it is. So you can see it's really thin, and that's so we can just subtly alter and smooth out our black. So looking back at the model, I'm just looking to alter those parts on the thigh where it's not quite smooth, and I just want to get those shadows nice and strong again. So I make sure I haven't got too much loaded on the brush, so I have lots of control. And you'll notice how I'm moving my brush stroke away from those highlights. That's just so we don't ruin them, and we're just looking to blend and bring those shadows back. I move around to the other part of the thigh, and you can watch again how my brush stroke moves down into the shadow. I'm just moving the colour over the line I want to blur and pulling it into the shadows. And I can just move around the model and just carefully fix all the parts I'm not too happy with. Like I said earlier, it's really optional, this step. Just depends on how refined you want your black to be. Maybe if you're doing an army, you just save this step for your characters. I think that's what I would probably do myself. I'm just doing a second pass here on the thigh, and it's just going to take 2 or 3 goes just to improve it. So here we have the finished miniature, and as you can see, with a few simple steps we can have a really high impact for our black armour, and this will look fantastic on the table or for an individual model. If you'd like to finish the miniature, then check out part 2, and if you enjoyed the video today, then give us a like and a subscribe. It really helps us a lot, and we'll see you in the next video.